Today we're going to be replacing the rotors and brakes on a 2003 Chevy Trailblazer. So the first thing we're going to do is pop off the cap here to get access to our lug nuts. Get a screwdriver. Now we're just going to loosen the lug nuts while it's on the ground. Now we'll put some blocking under the tires so that it doesn't move while we jack it up. Alright, now we're just going to use a floor jack and put the jack under the frame and jack it up. Once the car is jacked up, we're just going to put a jack stand underneath, and we can finish removing the lug nuts from the tire. Just going to throw the tire under the car as an extra safety precaution. Now we're just going to remove the two snap rings. With a 14mm socket, we're going to remove the caliper. There's one bolt on the top and one on the bottom. Now we're going to remove the bottom bolt for the caliper. Now we should be able to wiggle the caliper off. Next, we're just going to hang the caliper to the frame, being careful not to put any tension on the brake hose. Now we have to remove the caliper bracket using a breaker bar and an 18mm socket. There's two bolts on the back. The caliper bracket bolts are on there pretty good. They have some thread locker and they're torqued to over 100 foot-pounds, so they're a little bit tricky to come off. But if you have a good breaker bar or a long bar extension, you should be able to get them off. For the bottom one, we're going to have to use a wrench as it's too close to the sway bar to get a socket in there. And to get some extra leverage, we're just going to attach another crescent wrench to the bottom there. Alright, now we can remove the caliper bracket. Next we can remove the rotor. And to do that, we're just going to use a couple bolts and screw those in so that it pops off nice and easy. Once it's loosened up, we should be able to pop the rotor right off. Now we're just going to use a wire brush to clean off the hub. Now we're going to give the hub a coat of anti-seize. We're just going to spray some brake clean on and wipe it down on the back side before we put the new rotor on. Now we can put the rotor on, and we'll spray the front side with some brake clean as well. Just going to put a lug nut on just so that it doesn't move around, and we'll put our snap rings back on the two opposite sides. Now we can take the two metal clips off from the caliper bracket, and we'll clean up the caliper bracket. Just use a flat edge screwdriver to remove those clips. Now we just use a wire brush to clean up the bracket. Then we'll repeat the process for the other side. Just going to remove those pins and we'll clean those up. Now we're just going to use the grease that came with the brakes, the new brakes, and grease up the pins. Then we'll put the pins back in place and make sure that the boot is secure back over the bracket again. Now we're going to add some grease to the back of the caliper bracket there, where the metal clips are going to go, just to avoid any friction. Didn't supply enough grease, so we're just going to add some brake lubricant to the other side. And then we'll put the new clip in place. Should just snap in. And add some lubricant to the other side of the clip as well. And we'll repeat the same process for the other side. Now we're going to apply some thread locker to the caliper bracket bolts. Now we can slide the caliper bracket into place and loosely tighten the first bolt. Now we'll add some thread locker to the other bolt and then hand tighten the other one. Now we can torque those two caliper bracket bolts to 120 foot-pounds. Now we need to remove the brake fluid from the caliper piston. And to do that, we're just going to use an old brake pad and push it on the end here, and then use a compressor clamp to push the piston back in. We're just going to slowly move that clamp, and the brake fluid should return back to the reservoir. Now we're ready to slide the brake pads into place. Once the brake pads are back into place, we should be able to slide the caliper bracket over top. And we're going to be torquing the caliper to 23 foot-pounds. Alright, we removed the lug nut and we're ready to replace the tire. Now we're going to use a torque wrench and torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds using an alternating pattern. Once the car is back on the ground, I'm just going to retorque them just in case. Do it a second time for safety precautions. Now we're going to replace the cap for the lug nuts. We're just going to make sure that the valve stem is pointing that way, and we're going to make sure that it's pointing in the right direction before we snap it into place. Last but not least, we want to make sure that we pump the brakes a few times. Make sure that we return the fluid back into the pistons. That's how you replace the rotors and brake pads for a 2003 Chevy Trailblazer. Hope this video helps somebody else.